Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M. Neachai, and friends. Here, we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. This episode is the book interview, part 2 of our Talking That Talk, Loving Black Language and Linguistic Justice series. Today, we will be interviewing our inspiration for the series, Dr. April Baker Bell, a transdisciplinary teacher, researcher, activist, and associate professor of language literacy and English education at Michigan State University. A national leader in conversations on Black language education, her research interrogates the intersections of Black language and literacies, anti-Black racism, and anti-racist pedagogies. In her award-winning book, Linguistic Justice, Black Language, Literacy, Identity, and Pedagogy, Dr. April Baker Bell calls us to forefront race in our discussions of language instruction, specifically anti-Black linguistic racism, in a move toward linguistic justice, which she describes as a call to create an education system where Black students, their language, their literacies, their culture, their creativity, their joy, their imagination, their brilliance, their freedom, their existence, their resistance matters. Baker Bell then introduces anti-racist Black language pedagogy. And by pedagogy, we mean how you teach. So it is the ways that you teach, who you are when you teach, anything that is talking about how someone teaches. Anti-racist Black language pedagogy comprises of 7 critical inquiry-based learning experiences that provided Black students with an opportunity to learn Black language, learn through Black language, and learn about Black language while simultaneously working towards dismantling anti-Black linguistic racism. In her book, Black Language is Historicized in the Language Practices of African Ancestors that existed before American slavery, and Black language is contemporized by showing its influence over time. Moreover, Baker Bell problematizes the long-held belief that Black people must change themselves and that assimilation will save us in the end. In other words, it will help us to get jobs, be successful, or avoid run-ins with the police. She does this by advocating for Black linguistic consciousness. That is, when we challenge, interrogate, unlearn, and work toward dismantling anti-Black linguistic racism. What we find most beautiful about Baker Bell's book is that she shows us how she learned from and with Black students. Moreover, she credits her development of anti-racist Black language pedagogy to her work with students. Okay, so I'm excited to have Dr. Asia D. Reynolds join me as co-host for this episode. Asia is a healer, activist, artist, and educator. She is the legacy of Linda and the late Ralph Reynolds, a testament of her family's survival and resistance in the U.S. In the many roles she is positioned in, she is led by a Black feminist spirit of care, collectivism, and courage to confront systems of oppression. Her gifts possess the power to bring people together and bring light into dark places through laughter. Currently, she is a visiting professor of urban education and critical race studies at Wayne State University. Now, let's listen in on our interview with Dr. April Baker Bell so that we can learn more about her amazing book. Y'all look cute, though.
You look cute.
Be cute, okay?
Come on.
All right.
Your fro looking extra juicy today.
What's looking extra juicy?
Your fro, the juices and berries.
I had my juices and berries. I had put it in and let it marinate. You know, we got to be good. So we about to get started with this interview. You know, Dr. April Baker Bell already done played me about my questions being because I really read the book. Is that what you were saying, Dr. April Baker Bell?
You read that book.
I read it
from the front to the back and
from the rudder to the tooter.
I mean, you know, you can just take on some of my talks next year. Go ahead and do it. You got it.
I can't come, but I have a friend of mine.
Right, exactly. Who will check you and will make sure you read that book, you know?
Right.
Then I got some homework assignments for you to do. No,
Ooh, girl.
but first of all, I want you to know that I read it because I appreciate your work. And you know
Yes,
what?
yes, yes.
This is so it's so much Asia. It's just so much love in
Mm-hmm.
this book. It's just like I just felt like, I felt seen, I felt loved, I felt seen, and I felt seen at different points in my life. Like I
Mm.
felt seen as a student, I felt seen as a classroom teacher, as a Black woman classroom teacher, trying to like love our students, but then being like,
Mm-hmm.
make sure you code switch
Yeah.
because white teachers might, and giving our students all of these different messages. And even now as an academic, even what she's calling us to do.
Yeah.
So y'all
Mm-hmm.
get started.
Yeah.
All right. Angel, you gonna go?
Yeah. Thank you. So, we wanted to start, especially, I mean, even from your book and even from the trailer video that was like preparing us for your book. We learned then that, of course, our family, and me and Tiff, of course, know this, like our family is our first linguistic role model, right? When you talk about how you were trying your mother's speech and conversation, what words or phrases of your mother's do you remember trying on as a child?
Yeah, this is a good one. Thank you so much for that. And I, when writing a book, originally it was about the just like what you just pointed out, Tiffany. When I was writing the book, it was originally me focusing on what happened with the youth, right? But it took me to different points in my life. You know what I mean? In terms of like, how did I even get here? Like, how did I, you know what I mean? Like, what was my orientation to language? And I really started reflecting on my mom, who really is just like Dr. G would call it a linguistic genius, because she's just like, I mean, her, not just to read, just how she talks about things. And so I remember as a kid, I'm trying to think about like specific things. Like my mom would always say to us, can't ain't a word, and it was like her motivation to us to, you know what I'm saying? Like you can do whatever you want to do, and I remember that. I remember using that. I mean, cussing definitely was cussing. My mom would cuss up, and I mean, she would cut people up. So I was little cussing. You know what I'm saying? Like 9 years old. She didn't know I was doing that, but 9 years old, out cussing folks out. You know what I'm saying? And just because I heard, I mean, and it was like my mom. I think it was like the way she defended herself. There were moments when her and my father were not together. You know what I'm saying? And so she would be a single mother with these kids. I mean, single in the sense that we would be with her and living with her. And she really had to protect us. There was a bunch of girls. I have 4 sisters, 1 brother, and he's on the end, the baby. And there was just things she would do to have to protect us. But I really remember the inspirational words. I remember inspiring my friends real young, like, ain't a word. You can do whatever you want, or I'll cut your butt up like an onion, just like little things that I would say, you know what I'm saying, that was taken directly from my mom. And that stuff still, carries with me today. It's how I navigate the world. I'm grateful my mom is here, that I could call her up and have conversations with her. And she's still like creating just new words. I'm just sitting there like her student, being educated in language. So definitely.
I was about to say your mama hang out with my mama, because my mom, baby, she can go the in between. But when you said the cussing, I didn't even think about that until you said that. I'm like, I sure did. Like when she want to know where my words came from, like even now she's like, you cuss like a sailor, and I'm just like, I got it from you. Like
exactly.
When I was with my girlfriends, like I would literally imitate my mother. I'm like, girl. Let me tell you, bop, 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 and I'm over there cussing, feeling real free.
Exactly. No. It is. It's so true. Our mothers, and my husband says it all the time. He's like, you Brenda Jr., you act just like your mom, And I was like, but for some reason, you've been knowing her since we were teenagers, and you married me, so you love, what I'm saying? And he does. He loves my mom, but he just like, as I get older, he sees it more and more. Like, you your mom's child. And my son is how my son loves my mother's language. I see him imitate, you know what I'm saying, some of it too. Not the cuss words, because you gotta wait. Don't do it in my presence. But, does take on certain things, and he like restories, you know what I'm saying? How she responds, like if she has a problem at McDonald's or something like that, he like, and grandma did this. Let me see your manager. Yeah, my mom, and I think that just really, humanized the idea of a mother tongue. You know what I'm saying? It's a mother tongue, and so, yeah, appreciative of moms.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and you said something too about it being like part of also that you also seen her having to use her tongue as a weapon, as a
Yeah.
defense mechanism, right? And so I often think about that, right? Of like our mothers having to come up to the school, our mothers
Yeah.
always just having to stand in these places, especially with raising Black children, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's important too, of how we think about language in the mother tongue as this defense mechanism in this world for us.
Absolutely. Like a defense mechanism, joy. I mean, it's just so many things, so many multiple layers. Because I definitely remember my mom showing up at the school and she would get them people together, not in this standard English. She would use her mother tongue and get folks together, and they knew she wasn't playing. So
my favorite part is the reads of Black language. Like that's how my mother didn't cuss. We was in church. We was in the strict Kojic church. But the way she would be reading church people and other people with her, I'm like, you might as well go ahead and cuss.
Yeah.
You might as well go ahead and cuss them out.
Yep. Yep.
And just sitting and learning. I guess that's where I get it, because
Oh yeah.
I'm nice. But
Tiffany would gather somebody. I mean, because it's beyond the verbal. You know what I'm saying? We get people together in the way we look. Like I've seen Tiffany eyes go, you know what I'm saying, get a little larger because like she's trying to teach you something. But it's in our body language. It's in everything, right? You know what I'm saying? You can get somebody together and know what somebody's thinking without them even verbalizing it. That's how rich Black language is. I mean, even if you think about like, we can know it by looking at memes and gifs that people are using. We know, you know what I'm saying, what's going on. So it's just so dynamic and so beautiful, you know what I mean? And I'm just grateful for it, man. I'm just like, I'm so grateful for
it. We have. So speaking of the beauty of Black language and how we've seen it so much in our homes and in our families, and it was just a place of resistance, a place of love, joy. When we look at, coming back to your book, when we look at the cover art, we see a Black child with a hand over their mouth, right? And we just want to shout out real quick the artist, Dr. Gracie Player, who is our talented sister friend who does a lot of artwork. She worked with April to create this. But what were you, why this image, and what did you hope to convey with this image of a Black child with a hand over their mouth?
Yeah. So the image was like really a shout out to Grace. I mean, the process was important too, but like, I thought about the many narratives and stories that I've heard specifically from Black youth, in Detroit about their experiences with using their language in school contexts and outside of school contexts. I just would hear it, and it would be, the narrative would be like a collective narrative that you would hear from school to school, people to people age. Once I started talking to, like, my mom would tell me stories. When I started talking to folks and them reflecting and thinking about their experiences with language, it felt like this silencing, you know what I mean? This kind of like a belittling of language, but also that what I was finding out, and this is where, this is like, academia sometimes have this focus on one thing, like, like pedagogy, and all of these things. And I get to that in the book, don't get me wrong. But like what I started to see and hear from the kids is that their souls were being crushed. You know what I mean? It was deeper than language. Just like what Dr. East, I mentioned in the book, she said it goes beyond, you know what I mean, just language. You know what I'm saying? When you internalize like that hate, you end up like about your language, you end up internalizing the hate towards yourself. And I would see examples of that. I saw many examples of the Black kids resisting anti-Black linguistic racism, but I saw so many examples of that soul thing, like that you wouldn't even think language could translate into other parts of their life where it made them feel inferior and insecure. And so like that, so I was like, beyond, this is soul work. What I'm doing, this has to be for the soul. It's beyond technical differences and making them do this and that. Like, we got to get to the soul, because if we ain't got that, we ain't got nothing. And so in the image, I wanted to communicate that kind of that silencing and that, like, you know what I mean, how it was like them internalizing, you know what I mean, this kind of pain and like about themselves. And so I've always had this image in my head, you know, when I would listen to those stories. And so I was just like, you know, how can I, you know, how can I get this image out of my head? And there are images that look similar to this, but I wanted it to be, you know, if you look, I mean, from the afro, you know what I'm saying, from the hair, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't also want it to be where you could look directly at this and you could say that this child is you know what I mean? Like their gender identity, you know what I mean? Because it impacts across, you know, spaces in very different ways. And so so it was a process with Grace. You know, I met her, we were at, in fact, LRA that one year. And I sat with her and I said, you know, I'm interested in you, you know, because she did the LRA image. And I was like, I'm interested in you doing this image for me. And Grace is so amazing because she sat there and talked to me. What do you want to see? You know, and I brought her like pieces of images that were similar. I'm like, this is kind of it, but this ain't it, you know. And to watch her work, it was months, you know what I'm saying, where she would send me drafts and I'm like, the afro a little too stiff. It's kind of the Steve Harvey, you know what I'm saying? You know, I'm not really feeling it. And
not the Steve Harvey.
Wait, not the Steve Harvey. We don't do that.
I wish I could show y'all the images. We were laughing. Grace would laugh too. Like, you know, it was a little too stiff, you know, and like I would like go through rounds with my family and people would be like, you know, give their comments and I would send it back to Grace like, okay, can we bring the hair down just a little bit more over the forehead? And she was just so good about making that. And like, but the thing she definitely did, right? She understood that hand over the mouth. And like, you can see, if you look into the eyes of the image, you can see so many things, you know, like that's happening. And we can see all of us in it at different points in our life. You know what I mean? You can see your adult self in it. You can see yourself as a child. So it was really important for me that the image, not just on some dope stuff, you want your, you know, your book cover to be dope.
Right.
But like, I wanted it to reflect what was in the book. You know what I'm saying? I didn't first of all want the image to be just more powerful. Like me, I got a good image, but the book ain't doing nothing, you know. They needed to align with each other. They needed to speak to one another. And so, you know, that's what went into it. It's really it's a story. It's a story. The image is a story, a collective story, an individual story about Black people. And I wanted it to speak to Black linguistic justice because in language conversations, as y'all know, we don't get, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like them over there. Yeah, y'all got a little language that we should value, but not like, I feel like it's like here in those conversations. And I'm like, no, it's a linguistics, it's a language and it deserves justice just like other, you know, every other linguistic community. And so the Blackness of it, you know, it just had to be there.
Yep. Yes, to all that, especially the soul.
Man, the soul, like y'all messing with soul, you know, and for us to know that is deep, you know, it's this quote, I wish I had it in front of me, by June Jordan that she wrote in the 70s, and it's called Black English, White English. And she say that, you know, she's like, this is connected to our centuries of survival philosophies. You know what I'm saying? So when you take away the language, you taking away centuries of survival philosophies. You know what I'm saying? This ain't just like about the technical differences or the success of jobs. This is about this is how we survive, you know, even still. Right. I think about James Baldwin, who said, you know, and there was a moment in history when I needed to convey to the Black person next to me a message that the white person in front of us could not understand. And that was because of my survival, you know. And so it's important that we have our language, right? You know what I'm saying? It's so important, you know. I'm sure y'all could think of moments when we were creating language on a go, you know what I'm saying, for our survival, that we could be in a room with white folks, whatever, you know what I'm saying, wherever we at, we need to, you know what I'm saying, say something about that. And we create language on the go and we can pick up on it and know exactly what it is, right?
You tried it.
Yes, you tried it. Old Becky over there, or now you tried it. You know, so yeah.
No, that is so important. And I think about, like, you know, when we see young people trying to express themselves and they start using Black language, and when people shut that down, it's like you just shut down all of that, right? Yeah. Like, you took this time away from some young person trying to express themselves to be like, that ain't correct English
Yeah,
or that ain't correct grammar. And so now they're just like, I don't even want to continue to
exactly.
go on.
No, no, because you can't even tell me what's wrong. Like even the teachers that try to correct the police, you don't even know what you're talking about. You just identify something that is black, but you can't
Yep.
even tell me linguistically, syntactically, semantically, you know what I mean? You
Come on,
rhetorically,
Dr.
you
Baker.
can't even break any of that down. That's why I like to call teachers out. Like y'all, I love getting them in a room. Like, y'all love to use standard English. Like, let's define it. I mean, you can have two people at the same table and they can't come with the clear definition of what that is and what the rules are. You just know what it's not. You know what I'm saying? What's not white. That's what you could look at and go on to our language. That's not the way white people talk. Like, and so we just really have to break them down, like, because what y'all are don't even make sense. Because like for every reason, like that linguist would name a language, black language overqualifies. Let me just say it overperforms and qualifies.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? And so, and like even the standards in school, they so low for what a black child could do. They beneath. They beneath. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, well, we need them for academic. It's so beneath what they could do, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's insulting. It's what Toni Morrison said. She's like, you got a kid coming to school with 5 different verb tenses in one verb. You know what I'm saying? They could use for multiple, and you are like presenting him with books that are less than him. She's like, this is a real cruel fallout with racism. And it is, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's honestly not to knock whatever y'all monolingual, whatever way of thinking, but like, it's beneath what black children could actually do. We perform beyond that. You know what I mean? You can't even catch it. And that's why you're policing it, because you don't even know. You can't even catch it. It's moving.
Because you're not a part of it, because you're not censored in it. So now you want to police it.
That's right.
I just love how you framed that, how it's like what we teach them is actually beneath.
It really is.
Like, that was just the word. So in your book, so this leads us to this question where in your book you ask, what good is linguistic research on black language if it is not reaching the community it is intended to serve? So considering that question, we want to know why it is that so many teachers are unprepared to address black language in the classroom in ways that honor and preserve the identities of black students.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank y'all for that. So, when I was talking about that, I was a teacher in Detroit, you know what I mean? And I think this is what, not knocking, we all come to this very different, but like my perspective, being a classroom teacher is always like a perspective that I bring into it that helps me not just critique it for the sake of critiquing it, but like, dang, what's happening with, like, it helped me to identify who I wanted to be as a researcher. So when I came into the space, I'm like, I'm always reflective of my own training or my own experiences with it. So, when I was teaching in Detroit, it was the black kids, like, you have a sense of this, but the babies don't mind calling the stuff out. They just go, and especially if you the babies in Detroit, they don't mind just calling out when it's like, if it's BS, it's BS. And so I remember, being in a classroom and they like, it don't even sound right. These kids were getting into the political side of language. They were like beyond a technical. This don't even sound right. This is white people. This is how we talk. And so I always keep them stories with me. You know what I'm saying? And so when I enter academia, in that moment, I reflected back like, dang, we kind of prepared as if like students are going to speak one way. And that one way is going to be this white mainstream English. And that's just not true. Like we're not. And I noticed in that moment, we are not prepared to deal with diverse languages in the classroom, particularly not black language, and so that kind of like, that was me reflecting back, but thinking forward. So once I entered into graduate school, decided to take this up as a study, I've always thought about the literature, how are teachers trained, you know what I'm saying? And then what are the kind of implications for classroom teachers who are on the ground doing this work? And I just feel like, as we all know, people just be in the ivory towers doing their thing, you know what I'm saying? And they do it, and it's easy to do linguistic research and language research just by looking at language and trying to study language without engaging with people, you know what I'm saying? And I shout out to Dr. G, Geneva Smitherman, who was, who reason I went to Michigan State in the first place, who always were dealing with people and community and brought in the political. So that kind of informed that I don't just have to do it this other way. Like even pedagogy, like it can't be separate from the folks you're talking about. You have to constantly be in these spaces. You have to constantly be in conversation, because it's not just about what you think. Like in this book, I brought forth what the community thinks about language and thought about what does pedagogy mean, for that. But teachers aren't prepared because, number one, the language is Black. Because the other thing is, it's not like this is new. If we look in the research, literature, I mean, you had like Carter G. Woodson in 33, talking about, how, Black students are, kind of like taught to stuff at the Negro dialect, you know what I'm saying, instead of studying its connection to its African tongue. And so like this has been going on for a long time. It's not that we don't have research. It's not that we don't have like position statements. It's not that we don't have even some pedagogical successes. It's just that people don't want to see it, because like if you had to recognize Black people as being bilingual, if you had to recognize Black people as bilingual, that changes the whole nature of who we see as linguistically prepared and who could do what, right? You know what I mean? If that was the standard, you know what I'm saying? Like, woo, it changes up so much. So I think that part of it is, of course, anti-Blackness. Some of it is that, these teacher education programs are whack, you know what I'm saying? And, like they only care about a particular student, and so that's why, like, I wrote this book, as Carmen Kennard would say, you know what I'm saying? It's a manifesto of sorts, because I wrote it in a way, because we've never seen a book like this. It's not that we've never seen stuff on Black language. Like I get all this, but I wrote it in a way to kind of call out and condemn, you know what I'm saying, how we've been treating Black children, in their language practices. But also, you can't say it's not a pedagogical approach there too, because there's pedagogy in there, right? You know what I'm saying? It's pedagogy by youth perspectives. You see how they're responding. So I'm interested in seeing how this is going to transform the nature of, Black linguistic justice, and how, how we prepare teachers. I've heard some good things, over the last few months. Like some folks were like, yeah, your book is a required book in our program now. So, and that's not it. You gotta go beyond a book. You know what I'm saying? Like, what you could read that all day, you know what I mean? But what are you actually doing? So I'm just gonna continue to call folks out because we have to. But I think what this book does, it's not just for teacher education and teachers, right? I'm happy that Black people could pick up this book and read something, and I've had that happen. Like my father's neighbors, you know what I'm saying? My dad, like, I'm getting into your book, that people, it gives them like this kind of language. Like, I mean, in the medical world, that's a forthcoming project, Tap Me. Like, we need this, you know what I'm saying? Because imagine patient-provider interactions.
Wow.
If you perceive a Black language speaker as being inferior or not intelligent because you don't understand their linguistic system, then that's going to impact you hear them talk about their health, right? So I was talking to a public health person, and she was like, "This is it's a game changer for the health field, but it's also important in law. It's important in every single institution, right? Because we know that this is happening everywhere. Yet we seeing them capitalize off of the language. So it's not like people don't know. You know what I'm saying? Y'all are making jobs and create. You know what I'm saying? Like." Coming up.
Look at these commercials. Look at these commercials, these holiday commercials. Like, really?
I be recording them and archiving them and just pointing people out. I dare you to argue that I'm wrong. And because I want to be right, but we see it every day. Like, this is not just like something that's out of reach. You see it every day. The commercials, like you're pointing out, Tiffany, like we're seeing the restaurants. You can walk into any store, you see our language, our linguistic genius being capitalized on. You see these white Instagram celebrities coming up, so don't play with us. I think that, some of us sometimes don't see it that way. Like sometimes I'm always just like how, like, code switching is a skill, and of course we can do that, but have y'all thought about why we got to do that?
Right.
Have y'all thought about what code means? You know what I'm saying? Like, coding for what? You know what I'm saying? So it's just really, so I want us to even think more and reclaim, you know what I'm saying? That, you know what I mean? More, and not believe in this brainwashing, you know what I'm saying? That's intentional, you know what I'm saying? Because if we put ourselves and give up our culture and our, then, what is it? What's left, so.
So speaking of calling folks out, let's get into this call out real quick. That woo,
Which
I was
one?
sitting in my living room on my couch. Amen.
Amen.
And I was reading your book. And when I read this part, I felt it in my spirit and in my soul. Okay. I got to tell you this part. So let me see. Let me just read your words real quick. So this is what she says, y'all. First of all, stop telling Black kids that they can be the next such and such and let them be the first version of themselves. Second, do we ever tell white kids to code switch so they can be the next Steve Jobs, Ellen DeGeneres, or Donald Trump? No, we do not. Also, stop playing like Oprah, Barack, Michelle when them don't speak Black language. With these powerful points in mind, what are your hopes for anti-racist Black language pedagogy in terms of disrupting traditional and false notions of successful Black people?
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot. I mean, I was being shady and funny in that because you don't hear that. Like, honestly, like, I mean, to get to what I said, you don't hear that. I don't know if I'm echoing, Tiffany. I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay. You can fix it later in the recording.
Okay. So like my thing was to give examples of what this would look like if we did the same thing to white people. Right. You don't hear it that often. Like, oh, you want to be the next. I mean, especially Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's shade right there. I'm sorry, that's shade. And you ain't have to say nothing else. That's Black language.
You know what I'm saying? I was like, I mean, do we ever? You know, so like some of the examples, like I say, were for me simple things to get people to think, like, what do we say to Black kids and what do we say to white kids, so that we can see the anti-Blackness just embedded in something like that. And then just like upholding these particular Black characters as if Blackness is monolithic. You know what I'm saying? That there's only one way to be a successful Black person. You know what I mean? There's so many ways in which I think Black kids own that. You know what I'm saying? We know as Black people, there's so many different ways of how we identify success that's not connected to this white supremacist, you know, kind of version of, you know what I'm success. So I think like the Black language, pedagogy, anti-racist Black language pedagogy is not the intent is not to then recreate a standard. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not to recreate a standard, like upholding, showing Barack Obama, for example, as the linguistic person, because we know he got skills, right, in terms of how he can use language, but he's not the, like, some kids don't want that as their, you know what I'm saying? Linguistic, they don't want that, you know, and like sometimes they don't need linguistic role models, right? But I do believe that we can show many different ways in which people, in terms of a language pedagogy, people use language. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to be highlighting, you know, the people in the hood, you know what I'm saying, just as much as we highlight all of these other people, because sometimes that's not who we want to be. I know you particularly, Tiffany, we had a conversation about Oprah. You know what I'm saying? That's just not necessarily, we could respect that. But, you know, that's one way, you know, so I don't think, you know, so my thing is that it doesn't lead to us recreating a standard. You know, that's not the purpose of the, you know, anti-racist Black language pedagogy. The purpose is Black linguistic consciousness raising. You know what I mean? To understand how the historical, the political, you know, even the grammatical and the racial, you know, all connects to language. Like, language is not existing on its own. It's connected to all of these different things, right? And we need that awareness. You know, what happens when we have this awareness of our language? Because I know what it did for me. Like, I didn't come up with the negative perspective of Black language, but I know what it did for me when I read Dr. G's work. You know what I'm saying? It's like this deep history. When I read about language planning by John Ball, and like how they intentionally, you know what I mean, put different, you know, enslaved Africans in different groups so that they could communicate with each other. Yeah. I love how like Bell Hooks talk about it. So imagine the terror of seeing somebody that looked like you, but you have no way to communicate with each other. But then you kind of create this, you know what I'm saying, this language that's still here today with us. As a way not only to be able to communicate, but also to resist the oppressive environment that you're in. You know what I mean? So, it's important that we know this, right? It's important that you know that history in relation to, the language that you're communicating now. So that's the purpose of it, to do that soul work, you know what I mean? To do that consciousness raising. Then where do we go from here when we know this, right? You know what I mean? It's not about trying to get us to be this kind of standard Black monolithic language speaker. We don't want that. Because we ain't trying to create the same white supremacist system that oppress people, right? That ain't what we trying to create. So, yeah, but it was shady. It was definitely throwing shade. And I got more shade than Donald Trump. I use those in my presentations, but I do more shade. Not to shame him. It's really for example, because I don't believe in language shaming people, but, it's for example, though. We can look at him, and say that, and be honest about it, that some of the standards that we use for Black, brown, indigenous children in school, a higher standard for them than it is for the president of the United States. Is it not? You know what I'm saying? And so you got to call that out on teachers. What are y'all even talking about? So somebody get to be the president of the United States. And according to some studies, there's the studies, the vocabulary is at the 5th grade level. But he got to be president because he didn't need to use white mainstream English.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Because his positioning, him being a white man and used to be rich, I guess, you know what I'm saying, took precedence over anything that he needed to do. So, I mean, and we got to throw these examples that's right in front of us back to teachers to question, what are you even talking about right now?
I think, so this is a good segue to, you were just talking about teachers. And this next question, at the end of chapter 5, you stated, I like to wrap my brain around my students' words and ponder on what they are telling me, then that I could not receive during the time that the study took place. I credit these linguistic geniuses for helping me give birth to a pedagogical innovation that will surely benefit so many Black language speakers like myself. How can educators who read your book and engage in anti-racist Black language pedagogy also take care not to treat Black students as if they are not experts of their own native language?
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good question, and something that, I even had to learn, just because sometimes within the Black community, we know there are generational differences. And so I center myself in always being a listener, and also everyone's an educator. You know what I'm saying? Everyone's a knowledge holder. I think that that's always been my positioning in my teaching in general, but it's even more important as you become a researcher, you know what I'm saying, in this work, or this scholar, you know what I mean, that you don't think that you know more, you know what I'm saying, than the people you're working with, or anybody for that matter. You stand to learn something. And so those Black kids, I mean, they were doing stuff. Let me tell you something that I got to the party of some of what they were saying when I wrote that piece. I wrote to the party of what they were teaching me and schooling me on after I wasn't in their presence anymore. You know what I mean? Meaning years later, you know what I'm saying? That I was like, dang, even how I think about, even how sophisticated, they were thinking about racial violence and its connection with linguistic violence was so when I was working with these youth in this book, I mentioned that it was when Trayvon Martin, was murdered, unfortunately. And it was during the trial of George Zimmerman. So it was right after Trayvon. And so it's interesting. We were doing language stuff, but we had to think about how the world connects to this, though. But it was the youth were like, well, Trayvon Martin, you know what I'm saying, said this, and that didn't prevent him from being murdered. So tell us what code switching mean in the world for survival. Y'all say survival, but what do it mean in the world to survive if you're being killed? If white mainstream English can't protect your life, which we talking about, that's the ultimate level of survival. And they were saying this, and I heard them, I'm like, man, preaching. But that was these kids, and Black Lives Matter, of course, was happening around the same time, but not like how it was. These kids were already thinking in terms of Black liberation, you know what I'm saying, very early on in this study. And in that moment, I was getting it, but I was not fully getting it in terms of how it needs to interrogate and shift and change my work to kind of speak to a different moment in history. You know what I'm saying? That you can't just sit here in a moment of, you know what I'm saying, these youth who are thinking like this, Black liberation movement, protests. You can't sit here and cut that off for the sake of, let me do my research over here. It don't have nothing to do. It has everything to do with it. It took me a time to actually fully listen and wrap my head, you know what I'm saying, around what they were saying, and then to use it to interrogate the world. Because my commitment to those youth were that what needs to change and shift in terms of pedagogy? What do teachers need to do? So see yourself as offering something to make teachers do better, even if it's not for you in this moment. And that's how we know as Black people, we think about it's for generations unborn. We like thinking about folks that are coming up on the scene, what changed, and that was their commitment. So I had to have integrity to my commitment and the type of things they wanted to see, and to shift the nature of how I was thinking. And I was always thinking like this, but I mean, where I had to be more bold in what I said. I had to be fearless, you know what I'm saying, and get myself together, because you got to say what needs to be said. That's and man, but like, it came from them. I truly mean that. It's not no nice, like, oh yeah, the youth, I'm listening to their voice. I really had to listen to their voices. They were getting me together years down the line. Years, like, you know what I'm saying? Well, what does this mean? And I'm like, and you have to go against like the design of research that you were trying to do a certain thing, go back to that data separate from what your research questions are, what you're trying to understand. Just read the data and see what the kids are saying. And it just shifted, you know what I'm saying? It shifted. I said, this is what they were talking about linguistic justice. They were talking about anti-Black linguistic racism, you know what I'm saying? And they didn't have the language to name it, but they had the story and the intention, you know what I'm saying, of justice and liberation in mind. And so like, then my job is to develop the language, you know what I'm saying? Like, what were they saying? You know what I'm saying? To come up with, okay, this is the framework. This is how they're thinking, because that's the expertise that I bring. That's your job. You listening and trying to put this back out in the world, not change their minds or, so I owe everything you know what I'm saying, to not only the children in this study, any Black kid that I had an opportunity to teach long before I even thought anything about writing a book or, you know what I'm saying, graduate school. Those were the kids just like, they were just up in there schooling.
I mean, I often think about, I think I was saying this to Tip the other day, is that, with the sophistication of Black language, like we don't, like particularly in academic spaces, we don't talk enough about how like sometimes y'all don't have the language to talk to our actual experiences. Like y'all have never gotten that far. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I felt this way in doing my research with Black girls at times, that I'm like, I can't put this differently.
Yes.
There's no other way for me to write what you just said. Yes. There is no translation. This is it.
That's right. I mean, it's Dr. G said that, like, Black language explains our theory of reality, and sometimes like there is not like, getting back to that point of like this, white mainstream English is what I'm gonna call it. It doesn't have even the capacity for us to communicate to some stuff, right? Like, so you hear so if we think about the context of Detroit, Asia, like, we know the 8 Mile border, whatever, like what is symbolic for, particularly outside of Detroit. But so this this student that I was working with was talking about these Black bougie women who were judging her for the way she talked at her church, Tiffany. You know what I'm saying? So like, she was speaking of like, she's a churchgoer. She's like, and they were like judging me. She was like, they, you know what I mean? They, we're talking like I could be a baby mama. She was just going in, and she was like, they probably out from 21 miles somewhere. Now, she didn't really know where they live, but she was putting them so far out and away from the city with their bougie Black way of thinking. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, how she signified on 21 mile. If we know the 8 Mile border, we know we go back to 7, we go back to 6, right? You know what I'm saying? She put them fools so far out, and it was to indicate not like technically geographically where they live. It was they so far removed from Black people, from the culture, from the language, you know what I'm saying, that they judge it. And I was just like, so when I try to teach, I use this example to say you can't even translate, like if you know, but you can't really break that down and code switch that, because she's getting the class difference, and she's getting it to the racial difference. 8 Mile symbol, like it's so much there, right? So much richness in that one example. That's a whole you still won't be able to do it, but that's a whole 15, 20 page thing to have to like bring in that historical context of Detroit that you have to know in order to make sense of what she was saying. Like, you have to understand this. And some people won't do it. And I'm just like, it's, our language is so sophisticated. It's so amazing. We don't have time to switch back. There's no way to switch back. You can't even, it's not even capable of taking on some of that. Some simple stuff, yeah, but like, y'all don't know how sophisticated our language is, especially when we get into the rhetoric of it. The rhetoric gets really like complicated. You want to be knowing, like, what are they saying?
I'm so glad that you brought up that part in the book about the disconnect. Like, you say, sometimes people say things like that about Black language or judge other as Black people because we're so disconnected from Black people.
Yeah.
I remember one time Asia and I was talking about how I don't know if it was Oprah or Ava DuVernay getting offended when people were calling them auntie.
They both got offended.
They both were offended when Black people were calling them auntie. And I remember, Asia, you was like that, and I thought that was so profound when Asia was like, that just shows me that you're really disconnected from Black people.
Yeah. Because
we're respecting you, we're honoring you.
Exactly.
We are, when we call you, just like I have students, I'm under 40 and but I have students, former students who call me auntie. When you become a classroom teacher, I just feel like you become like a big, older than you are in your school.
Yeah.
So I remember people looking up to me when I first taught my first college class, this young man, you remind me of my auntie.
Yep.
I didn't get offended by that. I thought that was love. I thought that was it's respect. It was so endearing. And I think, and it's powerful about the way we look at it and the way we judge other Black people as Black people shows our connection or disconnection from Black people.
Yeah.
And I think what you're offering here in this interview is anybody can relate to it, because I think that's my biggest fear, is to get so in this academy and do this work that I'm disconnected from Black people. I don't ever want to be disconnected from Black people. And it's so easy to do that, especially all of us are in this. We have the things, we have the papers, we all got our PhD.
Yes.
People think that's a big thing. It is. We worked hard for it, but I mean, it doesn't fully define us. And I don't care what degrees. And I know the three of us, but we didn't come to this for no PhD.
No.
That's just where our life took us.
Yes.
Now we gonna here. And we're going to milk that PhD.
That's right.
To help our people.
Right? That's right.
That's what we're doing it here for. And so that's always like my biggest fear. And it's interesting to me. This is so great, because I really wanted to ask you about that example, but I couldn't fit it in, and you said it anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's powerful about how language is a strong indicator. In that example I think it was Janelle.
Yeah, Janelle. Janelle.
From the book, about how people mark you where you're from, where you're at. I remember when I was in my doctoral program, I remember one of my white colleagues who was in my doc program taking classes with me, who grew up working class. She said, "Oh, you grew up on the east side of Buffalo? I thought you grew up in the suburbs." And what she assumed that because of the way I spoke. And I was just like, and it's interesting, you felt like she was somehow an expert on it as a white girl who went to school with a whole bunch of Black kids. That made her an expert on where Black people are from, because you went to school with a whole bunch of Black kids and you're a working class white person. And so I think that's very interesting how people use it to mark even people who, like you said earlier, April, you don't have no background in Black language. You may have been still it, you use it when you want it, but you're not an expert on it. But you feel like you can place me and tell me and I don't code switch. I say when I'm presenting, I say whatever I need to say to make that come forward. That's just why I've always been that way. I can't say it no other way. I want to know, did you understand? But did you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, Black language is just so versatile, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not one way. Like, we know it. Like, if some people go, because I've gotten it too, like phonology, how you sound, you know what I'm saying? Like, and they missing all of, you've been told them all up with the rhetoric, you know, they didn't even realize you put the edge from the back to the front, you know what I'm saying? And they miss it because they sound a certain way, you know? And so like, that's always an issue. And for me, I call this in my book, you know what I mean? And we did this in the Black Language Demands. You know, a lot of white scholars have gotten, you know what I'm saying, a lot of credit for being Black language. And some of those studies were important from being Black language researchers, even more so than the Black language researcher who speak Black language and live Black language in community with Black language, and it was their mother tongue. So I'm just like, hold up, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? We embody this in a very different kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just calling people out, you need to step back a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So if we're citing and we are privileging white Black language researchers more than Black language researchers who that's their lived experience, we got a problem. And I just said it. It's in the book. I just said it, and I've said it in other things because that's what I've seen. I'm not going to go to, you know what I'm saying, like feel that I have to privilege and uphold, you know, some white Black language scholar over what I know. I mean, the reason that the book is the way it is because it was in community with Black people, and I listened to Black people on it. You know what I'm saying? Separate from the research stuff, I listened to Black people. In fact, I cited some of that stuff a lot less. You know what I'm saying? Like, where we got to be citing what the people are saying. We're always making theory. We're always, you know what I'm saying, honestly doing research. We're always doing that. That's already there in the way we're doing it. So, and also, like, you know, to your point about the auntie, I did see people writing. There were some think pieces being written. I just couldn't deal with it because I'm like, here go this crap. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Again, where we just want to like whatever. So y'all go over there and do y'all thing. But they wouldn't be able to survive in communities with Black kids because in the book, I talk about how those Black kids they basically interrogated me. You know, like, where you from? You know what I'm saying? What high school you went through? They want to check. In Detroit, that's a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, they want to know. Because there are all type of people that claim Detroit, never lived there, whatever, you know. So no, there's like this kind of historical thing. So they like, what high school did you go to then? You know, and I'm like, I went to Redford. It ain't even open no more. Oh yeah, my auntie went there. You know, but like, you got to be ready for the Black kids. You know what I'm saying? And it's not something that I took offensively. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're disrespectful to an adult. No, that's the culture. That's how we do it. You know what I'm saying? And that's how what they're doing is placing you to see how I could trust you. You know what I'm saying? And because they've had several experiences with people coming in, taking stuff and leaving. You know what I mean? Because like, if we think about folks like Ava, we think about people like Oprah, like y'all, you know, part of y'all come up is off Black people. You know what I'm saying? It's you know what I mean? So don't try to act like that, you know, but like,
while keeping a good distance from Black people.
Come on over there, you know.
I'm gonna write about y'all, but y'all stay off the lawn.
Yes, come on. Okay. In your book, you advise against research about Black language that is disembodied from Black students' lived experiences and how they navigate the world in their Black bodies. Anyone who reads your book, I already said this, will see and feel your love for Black students and the seriousness with which you take this teaching work. You provide composite character counter stories that shed light on the inner battles about Black language that Black students endure, which I really appreciated. So how did you feel and what did it mean for you when you noticed, and these are the students that she highlights in her book, Janelle, Lola, Crystal, Ali Starr, and Fetty, displaying a Black linguistic consciousness over time? Because over time, you could see it. How did you feel about that?
It was really like, it felt unbelievable because it's not like the pedagogy, because, you know, when you look at research, they always talk about how it takes a long time, but you were seeing their consciousness rate like day by day. You know what I'm saying? It was in real time, happening very quickly. And like they would read a piece by Dr. G, for example. And like, they would come back in there, like, I didn't even know the history behind, you know, like African-American language. They would say things like that. And I think for me, it showed the power of pedagogy. You know what I'm saying? The power of Black educators, the power of being, you know what I'm saying, in community, from community, you know, with Black youth, you know. and how it can transform. And for me, not just this little stuff, like say if I was focused on, well, let me assess, you know what I'm saying, and look at like how it changes through their writing, you know what I'm saying, something like that. It's so limited, you know what I mean, in terms of what you could see, but to hear them just talk, you know what I'm saying, day by day, and to grow. And some of the kids were taking the conversations home, you know, in other studies that's not in this book, you know, took it home and had a whole conversation with like their families, their grandma, you know what I'm saying, their father, who was like a political, person in the community. And to see them have like these very deep conversations around language, I think it was just so powerful. And it sent the message to me that don't wait, you know what I'm saying? Don't get so caught up in the research where you're not doing the work. You know what I'm saying? And the work for me is of like dealing with the souls of the Black young people. You know what I'm saying? Making sure that they have that linguistic consciousness to use it however they choose. I don't necessarily have a target on how they choose to. You know what I'm saying? If it's that they're going to say, well, I'm going to decide. Somebody could take it like I'm actually going to code switch. You know what I'm saying? Because this is showing me how to. That's on them. You know, we don't have rights to how they do their thing. But if somebody say, hey, I'm about to show up in here Black as ever, you know what I'm saying, then they got the right. They own the right to do whatever they choose with this knowledge. And so like, for me, it's just like getting it in their hands. Like what happens, I wanted to know, even because what happened to me when I when I knew the history and I knew it in a deeper way, what would it do for the young people, right? And also not being afraid of the type of pedagogy, because what got me there was reading stuff like Dr. G's work. You know, you don't got to baby that stuff. And those kids were reading stuff I read as a PhD student. I just gave it to them. And they can do it, and they did it, you know what I mean? And they came back, I mean, just deep and ready to go in. They got it. They understood it, you know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, it did a lot. It did a lot for my soul. And it just, and so when I think about the work and I think about the challenges of the work or what people want to be the challenge of the work, I do not stand down, because I'm just like, I'm not going to stand down. You know what I'm saying? These youth, like, you know, kind of like I have to be responsible to them. And you know what I mean? And that's like accountability there. And like seeing their learning, you know, across time was just like, it heartens me, you know what I'm saying? And it keeps me going. It happened over and over again. Honestly, to see the pedagogy happen with the students in my teacher education program who are not Black, to see this pedagogy that the Black youth that I did in community with Black youth is the same exact approach I use in classrooms in my teacher education courses. And we know the majority of those students are white, you know what I'm saying, middle class. I do it in AAAS too, so then I get the Black ones. But it's interesting to watch that same pedagogy, the dismantling work it does with white students, you know what I mean, too. And this is a pedagogy that came out of Black kids. And like they just didn't know. They like, oh man, like, and some of them little white, you know what I'm saying, teacher ed folks, they roll out of there and be ready to be about it. You know, I'm like, be careful now, you know what I'm saying? But they, you know, it's, you know, so like I use the same pedagogy. I don't do anything different for them. I don't hold back on the white students. If you in this class, I tell them day one, you don't got to take it. You could drop. There's another class down the hall doing something different, but this is how we doing it. And they stay through the end, you know? And so, so it's been good work in a lot of ways.
At the end of the book, you exclaim, "You have to be about this life for real, for real." When it comes to anti-racist Black language pedagogy, you then briefly mentioned the messiness of this work. How would you describe the messiness?
Yeah. There's a lot of messiness, you know, like I could think about it. There's a lot of messiness of it. So like some of it that I would describe on the level of being in a classroom with the kids is, okay, several things. Like when the kids, so part of what I did was spoke to the teacher, you know what I mean? Like about what are your practices? I just want to know in general before we get started with this. And the teacher tell you stuff. Yeah, you know, because I don't correct the kids. And then, you know, the kids show up on the scene and their narrative don't match with what the teacher's saying. Yeah, like the teacher is correcting them, you know, like they just come out. Like it's not even that I'm asking the kids, that they just explaining their experiences with language. And they're like, yeah, Miss such and such. Yeah, she corrects us. And also to see it happening also in real time. So there was a moment in the book I talked about where I think it was Maverick. It was one of the kids who said, I don't know, he used Black language, maybe a multiple negation or something like that. And the teacher was like, although he said it this way, he's really intelligent. Like Like, she explained back to me, and I'm looking like, yeah, I know you're intelligent, but that even countered what she said she was doing.
Right.
So messiness that happens on there, and also me thinking about not trying to condemn the Black teacher, while I'm writing this book, you know what I'm saying? So that was messy for me. Or when you have like people who outside the teacher, like I had a resource room teacher who came in because they come into the rooms anyway for their students, and she sat in and she was like, listening to what we were doing, and she was like, what you doing with what you doing with the kids? Because they hear ebonics, and these older folks, they just like, ebonics, what you teaching them? So I sat with her, and it also means that I have to be patient in some way. She's a Black older resource room teacher, and she was like, do you think that's, what I'm saying, going to help them? Or how do you think this is going to help them? And so you have to be able to translate that and communicate why this is important. And, after being and it don't happen instantly sometimes, and after being in conversation with her, she was like, you know what? I admit that I police a lot of kids, their language. She said, because I don't want them to go through what I went through. She was like, I came up in a certain era. So she had a narrative, you know what I'm saying, to speak around what she did. So like you got to be ready for, you don't know what's going to come to you. You might need to get ready to get put up out of schools, you know what I'm saying? Because some people might be like, I don't know what you're doing with these kids. And then you have, but also honoring the youth stories, right? You know what I'm saying? Honoring what they're saying, because my integrity is first, the youth, you know what I mean? I had another situation that happened where I just had to challenge this lady right on the spot. And I was like, I don't even care if she get it, but it was, and in Detroit, you get Black educators. So it's not hard to come across Black educators. And I think that the toughness is having to deal with the Black educator who has experienced anti-Black linguistic racism. And it's not that they're inherently wanting to do this, but they had their own experience and they think they protect them. So you deal with them differently. But I remember being in elementary school and I was doing surveys on teachers' attitudes, and it was long before the book. And this teacher was like, she said to me, so do you think how is a language that's not a language, something like that? Like, how is, a language that don't even mean anything, a language or something? And I was like, you using it. So I was like, so how can the language you're using right now? It was something. I just called her out because I was like, you're using a language while denigrating it. You know what I'm saying? So if your logic works, then how are you communicating to me and I understand it if it's not a language? And so I did one of those on her. And she was just kind of like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? That like, really? And I kept going with her. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can go and I could actually pull out what you just said and dissect it for you if you need me to. And she was like, well, I'm not doing a survey because I don't think it's a language. Good for you. I was like, okay, I don't need your survey. Fine. Have a nice day. But I left the school, and an hour later, the person that was representing me there called me and said, the teacher said, you got her really rethinking how she thinks about language. And so it's messy in that, like, you could be in these little schoolyard fights, or you got to challenge people, like, because I'm not going to stand down is what I'm not going to do. When I'm looking at a Black child sit right there, you're talking about their language is not a language, the language that you're using too. So it's messy in that sense, but then it's messy as a researcher. Like, one of the messiness is some stuff that we tell each other, we know as Black people, even when using Black language, we know what we mean, but it could be taken differently from people outside of our communities. And so one of the things that I knew is that only Black people ain't reading my book, white people are. And I don't want them to take anything and make it something pathological about Black people. So like, if kids say, yeah, if I talk like that, my mama gonna hit me in the mouth. Now we know as Black people, the mama ain't hitting the kid in the mouth. That's just what we use, you know what I'm saying, to kind of communicate, you know what I'm saying, that my mama don't play that. Not that I actually got punched in the mouth. And so I had to choose between what I was going to put in there and what I wasn't. And it was things like that. I was like, I'm just not going to do that because there's some stuff you're not going to have access to. You know what I'm saying? Like, Black people, we can get this, right? You know what I'm saying? And understand it, even how deeper it goes. But I wasn't going to like reveal certain things where white people could just focus in on that example to, you know what I'm saying? Reinscribe, the very thing I'm trying to dismantle about what happens with our community. So it's messy on so many levels. It's messy that, you go and give talks and people are there to perpetuate, you know what I'm saying? They don't want to see it come in. Like, they ask stupid questions. Well, how are Black people going to participate in a global market? We are the global market. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? We are the global market.
Come on.
How you understand that? You know what I'm saying? We are the global market. Like what you looking at? And so stuff like that where I pride myself on being direct. You know what I'm saying? And just saying it just like that. It might hurt your feelings. Or like I gave a workshop last week with some teachers, and a white teacher was like, we all code switch. You know what I'm saying? We all code switch based on the situation. I said, let me stop you right there. It's called register when you're thinking about the formality of a situation, informal, formal. Well, yeah, we all use registers. Code switching is a different thing. That's not the same thing. And so, and I know she didn't like that, but I'm going to stop you in your tracks because what she can say, Carrie, you're a white woman.
Yeah.
You're speaking
right.
very confidently about something you don't know about. You know what I'm saying? Something you have no question. So like my job is to stop you and correct you right there so it don't carry. So what people remember is correction and not what you said, you know, so stuff like that. It's messy work, you know, and so it's not for, you got to be about it for real. And I mean that, like, you can't get scared, you know what I'm saying? Once you get up there, because people like, how do you say this to people? I just say it right back to them. You know what I'm saying? I just say what needs to be said. I'll call something that your question is really grounded in white supremacy and anti-blackness. And I want you to rethink it. You know what I'm saying? I want you to rethink it. Some of my Q&As are like, don't ask me these kind of questions.
Yeah.
You be asking yourself. And I do that, and people are like, oh my God, she just going in. I don't care. I mean, you know, why would I care about that? Nothing for me. You don't got to like me. You don't got to like it. It's not about like. It's about the Black youth that y'all are messing over. You know what I'm saying? That don't have what I have to be able to speak back to you in this way. So, yeah.
I think it was just also so important what you were just saying about how you were choosing what to put into the book and not put into the book so that people didn't, you know, try to run away with that thing. I feel like that's something that happens, and I don't know if y'all experience this even with y'all students with Lisa Delpit's book. Like I always feel like the readings around how to engage language with Black children and what their home language, like people take that as if like if they mama yell at them at home, I'm supposed to yell at them at school, and I'm always like, how did you hear that?
Yeah.
Like it's always some interesting readings that I feel like that people take away from affirming home knowledges versus like if it's like if it's violence at home, it's violence at school. Why would you repeat that?
Exactly. Exactly. What part of you? Sometimes I just be like, what part, as a human, what part of you would think that will work? You know what I mean? It's just like, so you do got to be careful. And like, that's why it took me a long time to write the book, because I had to be delicate. Like, even if I did put something out, like if I said, you know, like internalization of anti-Black linguistic racism, I would quickly follow it up with, this is to be expected when you're in a white supremacist system that does this and that. Like, I had to couch those things, but I also had to put it out there because I don't think we talk enough about it, and the Black youth wanted to talk more about it. Like, also, even some people don't write about Black educators perpetuating this, and I get why, right? Because we didn't create it, you know what I'm saying? But in some ways, like, I had to say that it do happen. Like, we can't be as simple as thinking that culturally relevant. Like, if you see somebody's face, like, as we know that do some things, yes, that's great. But we can't assume also that person automatically comes in, like with the radical pedagogy, like some people do, but not everybody. Just because we exist in this system that, you know, takes so much from us, you know what I'm saying? And we perpetuate it back, thinking in the name of survival, you know what I'm saying? But we deal with how we talk about that is very delicately, because we understand how that happens, you know, and honestly, how we talk about teachers, not the same delicacy like of a Black educator, but how we talk about even teachers, we got to understand that they also were part of what Dr. G calls this cycle of miseducation, right? That they didn't create, you know what I'm saying? And I think that creates a space for me to understand, like, I get it. But, you know, like, when you know better, you do better. You know what I'm saying? So, like, that's what I hold you to. That don't mean it's okay. You're going to see how you work in the system, you know. But with Black educators, I always make sure that I write about that in a certain way. This is the reason, you know what I'm saying? I back it up and not just leave it out there, because people love to take that and run.
Yep. And I feel like too, like, you know, I appreciate the delicacy, because people, sometimes white educators who will read this book and and then, you know, the side conversations about the Black educator that you think is inadequate, you know, and now you got this. Now I've read April Baker Bell's book on Black language, And this black,
That's not what
and
it's
that's
about.
not what this is about. First of all, you don't get to check them because you don't even understand what they're dealing with. You know what I mean? When we talking about the complicated conversations we got to have with black educators. That's a family conversation.
Yeah. You ain't
that's a family conversation. So let's be very clear about that right now. So that's the black people with black people with black people. That's talking about this what we need to do in our family conversation. And I think that's important. And I appreciate the delicacy of that, because sometimes I'll hear people like, I posted about this a while ago about people saying something like, I don't, I like black people that's like, I love black people and everything, but I have a complicated relationship because they teased me when I was a kid and said I was talking white.
Yeah.
Okay. I went through that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, here's the thing with that like, if you can understand why white people do what they do, how can you not understand why black people tease
and I
you for
always
talking
hit
white?
people on that. You know what I'm saying? And I hate that that's always the dominant narrative that serves the conversation on black language. You know, like, but people are white. I mean, right. People are right though about that, right? Not in terms of you sounding, but it's not about you. What the critique is that there is a white way of communicating, and we know that there's a way us black people communicate, no matter what you say. And if we look at history tells us, you know what I'm saying, how those things came about, right? No matter how we're communicating, it's not really an indictment of you, you know what I'm saying? Because we understand like what it means to exist in this damn country, right? You know what I'm saying? And we also understand that black people are, it's not monolithic, but that's a starting point for those conversations. I'm always like, that's a good place to start when somebody says, well, you're talking white. Well, let's talk about the history of this. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about when you add these other narratives to it, it makes sense, but it's not totally wrong. You know what I'm saying? When somebody says someone sounding white, because we know that we are held up to white ways of speaking English. You know, so for me, it's always not like, let's go away from that conversation, and let's not blame black people for that conversation. You know what I'm saying? But let's have the conversation. You know what I'm saying? We could actually, that's a great starting place, you know?
And I think, I mean, it's what you talked about earlier about even how the distance that young person was putting on that other person, right? Around like, this is for us oftentimes an indicator of your proximity to whiteness, right? Like this becomes an indicator of like, where you from?
Yeah.
What school you go to? Like, it's us trying to figure out like, you be around white people, but I'm trying to figure out like
exactly. That's what I'm saying. You know, it's not just out there. And I hate when we get dismissed, you know, for our analysis, you know what I'm saying, of situations, of how we read the world. Like, it ain't about you. I mean, and we dealt with your mama jokes in our community. Come on, man. You mad because somebody said you talk white. Like, really? You just want, that's your proximity to whiteness sometimes when you try to be like, well, Lincoln, you know, because that's where you feel comfortable, you know, and you got to do some reflection work. So, right.
Don't blame us. So, even thinking about this delicacy with black people, how we're being understanding, and I love that. What would you say to black parents and black teachers who are trying to unlearn their own internalized anti-black linguistic racism in an effort to embrace black language with black children? And so I guess, like, basically, how can we as black people heal from the pain of anti-black racism?
I mean, I think like this work is even more important in our homes. You know what I mean? Like, to think about like this system that we exist in. I think that these conversations, so what the book does and what we try to do even with the Black language syllabus is create a space where you don't have to be part of academia or enter it to get the knowledge about Black language, right? That is so necessary for our own healing. I think what I would say to parents is, you know what I'm saying? Be critical of these kind of white, like this white gaze, you know what I'm saying, that's placed on, like language, particularly, you know what I'm saying, in terms of what will, like, I think that in some households, according to some of the kids that I worked with, the belief is that you don't talk this way at home, or that you do some correcting of the kid at home so that they don't so that they understand that you don't use this language, you know what I'm saying, everywhere, that to get a job, you can't use this language. And I think what parents have to know is that is harmful, very harmful, to language learning in general. And it creates, a conflict, you know what I'm saying, among youth, and young people, just thinking about language, because they're thinking about language in relation to the world, and like what many of the young people understand, and what you feel in your body, which we all feel it. You know what I'm saying? When we know something is anti-Black, we feel it somewhere on our body first, even if we can't explain it. So like what a lot of the Black youth would say about language, they knew, like the act of code switching, or, you know what I'm saying, you can't use this here. They feel that it's something wrong, you know what I'm saying, with that is something being communicated about. It's something wrong with Black people, something wrong with their culture, something wrong with their family. That they can't put their hands on. And like, so this pedagogy kind of creates space to have these conversations. But when this is happening in the home, that's even more damaging, right? If it's happening at home and it's happening at school. So I do believe that, in some of our households, and I think a lot of Black people don't be thinking about that like that. You know what I'm saying? They don't even care. But in the ones where it is happening, which I don't want to just say like blame middle class Black people, but or fault them for anything, but like the children that I was working with, I found that to be a little bit more present in Black middle class families, than it was in, like other families, because it's just like, like I say in a book, how I kind of grew up. It wasn't that, we never even talked about that. Like I would watch my parents do stuff, but it was never like, you know what I'm saying? We had this feeling of we were enough at home, so even if you entered into a school that made you feel that way, at home, we were enough, you know what I'm saying? And like Black language was, you know what I'm saying, the standard, you know what I'm saying? And the standard that you needed to reach, you know what I'm saying, as well. Like you come with some goofy, you know what I'm saying, clown language, then you be clowned, you know what I'm saying, in some ways. But like, I do believe that we need to have these, we need to be sitting at our kitchen tables having these conversations, you know what I'm saying, about not just like looking at racism and the anti-Black racism in the world, but how does it make you feel? You know what I'm saying? The soul work is what I'm talking about. Like, how, like creating space where your child can come and say, like, this is what happened to me and this is what I felt. So I had an incident that happened when I was teaching at Bread Loaf in the summer. We were in Vermont, really, really white space, you know what I'm saying? But really liberal white space. And one of my colleagues, we would do like carpooling, so DJ, my son, would go in the car with them and go to his little camp with the elementary kids, and then I, would go down there. And so my colleague, who's white woman, dropped the kids off, and one of the camp leaders called DJ bro, you know what I'm saying, or bruh, it was like Black, like, what up, bro, you know what I'm saying, something like that. He was white, and white woman she was just like, you know what I'm saying? She's like, but the way he approached her daughter was different. You know what I'm saying? Like the language that they use. And she just was like, that's problematic to me. And she was like, let me check. Like, is it okay for me to get him together on that? Because I didn't like it. I was like, shit, this is how white people, sorry from cussing, Tiffany, but this is how white people.
No, it's fine.
I'm like, this is white people doing the work. That's what you should do. You know what I'm saying? I don't mind doing it, but you go ahead and do your work. But I had a conversation later with Kai, with the kids, and Kai was saying how, she was like, yeah, I noticed that, you know what I'm saying? I noticed that, and she was like, it just didn't feel right, but I didn't know what it was. But she was able to, so we were able to unpack that. And I said, many experiences, you're going to feel it in your gut and in your spirit long before you have to name it. And it's important for you coming up in the world as a Black girl, going to be a Black woman, to trust that all the time, to know that something ain't right. And so like, I think that is important. And DJ was part of that conversation. You know what I'm saying? We had a whole conversation that was about, number one, honoring your soul. Like, know that your soul is right. It ain't gonna ever wrong, but then let's talk about this language thing, since this is, and so we had a whole conversation. And I think for them, that's important for me to do as a parent, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not about how you survive in this world and all of this, how it make you feel like, and how do you come in to understand yourself, you know what I'm saying? Spiritually, emotionally, you know what I'm saying? That is communicating something about the context. And so I just think that like having that space where kids could come and be able to talk about like how they feel about things is an important space that we must create at home. We must, it must happen at home, because this world is not going to give our kids or us anything You know what I'm saying? That's going to lead to our survival. You know what I'm saying? Like, and being able to thrive, it's not going to come from the world. It's going to come from what happens at home. And it starts very early. You know what I mean? Like, kids got to know that they Black Lives Matter at home. You know what I'm saying? Explicitly, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that these things don't happen, but like where we got to be very open about it. You know what I'm saying? You and DJ asked me stuff like, is it, so if it's a Black language, is it a white language? I'm happy you asked that. He was 5. I'm happy you asked that, son. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely it is, you know? And so like, you know, it's just like, you got to create those spaces, like not to just like, I could see in another household, no, it ain't no white language. You know, stop thinking like that. You know what I'm saying? That could happen in our households, you know, but like, what it would mean to be open to that conversation, you know, and to listen. So.
No, that's real. I think that, so this leads us to conversations around really thinking about bilingual education and multilingual education, and the ways that those spaces can be very anti-Black, like, right? Like, so we're talking about like, even in this school space that like, you know, young people who can speak Spanish or French or some type of other language is like, oh, they're really, I mean, that's the thing now, especially if you're middle class or upper middle class, like you can send your kid to the really good daycare and they're learning Chinese right now, right? Like people are excited about this. But then we don't see that translate, right, across to when we think about Black young people. And so, you know, we have this question around what could solidarity amongst various linguistically marginalized communities look like?
Yeah.
How do we show up for one another to fight against linguistic racism, anti-Black linguistic racism specifically?
Yeah, I absolutely love that question. And I love like who I'm in community with to think about this work. I always think about Danny Martinez, you know, because he wrote that piece, you know, on Black and Latinx youth, you know what I'm saying, being in solidarity around language. And his, in like areas of California, you know, you're going to get all of these mixed, you know what I'm saying, multiracial, multilingual groups interacting with one another. Whereas you might get some of Detroit, but you mainly get like, you know, Black students. But I think that like, so for me, you know, in Black spaces, it's important for youth to understand anti-Black linguistic racism first. I feel they have to learn about their own experiences, you know what I mean? And what does it mean? And, you know, from that perspective. But I think it's very important for them to be able to connect those experiences to the learning of how other linguistic community, like how Latinx folks on so many different levels, right? Because we know that there's so many different, you know, linguistic communities that exist in that group. But how do they experience linguistic racism? You know what I'm saying? And like, how do indigenous groups experience it? Because there's something collective across all of that, right? You know what I'm saying? We're all experiencing some level of linguistic prejudice, some level of linguistic racism, albeit very differently. And even like but we always learn about other groups, like on a level of language, the injustices that happen to them. That is about what Black people, when we experience, it's just like, no, y'all just don't talk right. You know what I'm saying? So so it was important for me in this book to, you know, kind of forge, you know what I'm saying, that path within the conversations around linguistic racism. And this is what anti-linguistic racism look like, so that people who are doing work on linguistic racism and other spaces can be able to, I feel, thoroughly talk about what anti-Black linguistic racism means. And the reason I added anti-Black to linguistic racism, because I needed it to be specific to Black. So thinking about Dumas and Ross' work on anti-Blackness and bringing together the conversation on linguistic racism, I'm like, we need So I think that the book, you know, puts out for other people to do that work, but I would imagine all type of solidarity work that can happen, you know what I'm saying, across, you know, different linguistic groups among youth, understanding how you experience this first and how do we connect with other groups. I think that it's power in solidarity. You know, there's so much that can happen, but no one can be left behind in that. And often in the conversations, I feel like Black language is kind of left behind. You know what I'm saying? It's not really elevated to that level. And so we cannot have a linguistic group being left behind, even within our own justice communities and our own solidarity work. You know what I'm saying? We can't leave groups behind, right? So yeah, I think that that's important. I'm really interested in how people might take that up. That's why the last part of it, you know, I'm like, it has to be language of solidarity. We have to see what that work might look like. And I hope that linguistic justice, Black linguistic justice particularly, help people to think about and do that work. How do you, because, if we're on this moment of Black Lives Matter and everybody, are trying to show that Black Lives Matter, like other racial groups, ethnic groups are trying to say, well, we have to address the anti-Blackness, that happens within our own communities. You know what I'm saying? And we really have to be in solidarity to show how this works. Well, like part of that has to be about language. You know what I'm saying? Like how does, Black language matter within these solidarity fights? So I think that I actually would love to collaborate with like Danny, you know what I'm saying, and some other folks on a piece, not just a piece, but work, dealing with youth. And what does that look like? Because I think that is just like the next step of it. But I was like, first, I got to do this work on anti-Black linguistic.
Mm-hmm.
We needed this book first, you know what I mean?
We needed this one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So speaking about your book is definitely a resource for educators of Black students in terms of content and practice. You show how knowledge of history and linguistic understandings are needed, not just skills, in order to engage in anti-racist Black language pedagogy. You provide these intellectually rich, that I read all of them and I love them, nuanced examples and Black language artifacts as opposed to lesson plans. And yet this book is for practitioners, not only practitioners, but it is meant to be useful for teachers. So why did you decide against a step-by-step, with the checklist and everything, anti-racist Black language pedagogy guidebook, that they could just follow, that some people would say would make it easier for teachers to apply?
Like I say in my work, I identify as a teacher, researcher, activist. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not, like I think through why is all of this important and what comes out of it being together. Like, and, like coming from a space as a teacher, just to go back a bit, like we think about practice, you know what I'm saying? So when you enter into academia, sometimes it's a bit challenging to understand the importance of research, right? Because but how does it relate? How does it translate? And so that was the issue that I was having before. But when I came to understand the importance of research and what it shows us, and how we can see, like through research, you can see that this is not just happening in this particular space, or you know what I'm saying. Like you can see like the research that's already been done, and it informs the political. Like, okay, so this is just not about that. This hasn't happened before. You know what I'm saying? This is about anti-Blackness. You know what I'm saying? That's what this is about. And then also, like for me, the pedagogy ain't nothing if you don't hear the youth voices. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get to see how they are engaging the pedagogy. That was important for me. If my purpose is, when I came to this work, is how are they experiencing the pedagogy? I'm interested in youth perspectives because we don't have that in the research literature. So like, it's important to see how they're thinking, you know what I'm saying, for those stories to show up. And that's the research, you know what I'm saying? If I just wanted to write a practical guide, it's easy to do that without even engaging a community. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't even have to engage, so it's important to me that their narrative showed up. And that's kind of the research, but also to show the research comes in terms of how does this impact them? How did the Black linguistic consciousness raise and shift in their thinking? You know what I'm saying? Like, and here's the narrative to kind of explain that. But the how-to guides, that's not my, that's just not, that's not my ministry.
That's not your ministry?
That's my, each his own with that. But I think it's half-baked in a sense because, people might get me on this. But like, I just feel like, because somebody could just take that. It reduces everything to just being about a lesson. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that the lesson can do anything. And I think what I tried to do in the book is reveal the voices. What were the kids saying? You know what I'm saying? In relation to this, like, it's not, so you need to understand that you're going to walk into this space and kids get all types of things that they're thinking in relation to language. It's not just about the lesson plan. And I'm thankful for Carmen, because who was a reviewer on my book. But Carmen said that also, like, she's just so savvy and brilliant, but she was like, also because it's a research series, you know what I'm saying? She's like, also be careful about the language you use so people don't try to reduce it in as if it's not about research. You know what I'm saying? Like it's definitely, it's high research, in fact, but like even calling it lesson plans, can reduce it to like a kind of a practical guide with some students' voice mixed in there. And it's about research, because I'm also challenging researchers. I'm not, it's a practitioner book, but it's also a researcher book. You know what I'm saying? You learn how to do research looking at this book. So it's not just that. It also shows researchers, it shows them how to do research. It also interrogates and challenges, like, what's your research mean? You know what I'm saying? If it ain't impacting the community, or it's not in community with the people you're talking about. So I don't see myself as like, I see myself as all of those things. So what does this guy, what would it look like to kind of produce, you know, a book that brought in all of these different parts of me, you know, and what would it mean?
I have this question around thinking about, because of the brilliance of black young people, right? And like oftentimes they're limited, like the ways that we're doing assessments is around testing and things like that, things that never actually even chip away at any of their brilliance, like get to any of the things they bring into the classroom. And so I find that your work in many ways is, you know, as I'm thinking about how does pedagogy centering home knowledges or black language challenge the ways we must rethink assessments?
Yeah. I mean, I think it shows the problem of the assessments, you know what I'm saying? And like, in the first place, because it's really hard to assess that. You know what I'm saying? It's really hard to assess, you know what I'm saying, the brilliance that, you know, black, you know, children bring into classroom spaces. But I think that it does show like the problems of assessment. So like if the norm, you know what I'm saying, that the expectation is that, you know, black kids can demonstrate that they can write or communicate in these kind of white linguistic and cultural practices. I mean, you could just see the conflict right there, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not even, can't even fully, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it reduces it. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting. I don't even know how to explain this. It's like, black language is always seen as this kind of like deficit, but the kids need to be able to do this, because the assessment, the black language is up here doing all kinds of things they can't even see. You know what I'm saying? Assessment is so basic, looking for things, subject, and all of these very basic things and basic understanding of writing that they missing. All of this brilliance that's happening up there that might even change the way you think about assessment. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that, like, you know, black language does it makes us rethink black culture in general. It makes us even rethink what is even assessment. You know what I'm saying? What does this mean? How can you even do it? How could you assess something that can change so fast, right? You know what I mean? And if you're not even prepared to, you know, understand, you know, you're not even part of that, because you would never have, you know what I'm saying, the ability to be able to fully assess that. So I think it pushes on assessment, you know what I'm saying? And that, like, we have very, very limited ways of thinking about what assessment is, you know, and so definitely a conflict there.
Okay, this is our last question. We're gonna let you go.
It's enjoyable.
I'm glad we wanted you to enjoy. That's the people we invite to the Evolving Education Project. People who gonna be here talking that real talk, that good talk about people who come we love. All right. So here at the Evolving Education Project, we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. And in this series of Black people specifically. So how can we better, for all of our listeners out there, all types of educators, people in classrooms and not in classrooms and not untraditional spaces and community organizations, parents, how can we better center Black students' joys and inquiries around Black language?
You know, I mean, the most basic thing is to let kids language, you know what I'm saying? Let them do their thing, you know, let them be free with it, you know, let them invent, let them innovate, you know what I'm saying? You know, like, but also participate in that, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, this is how I stay connected to young people in the community, because, like, just listen. And we have social media, even in this moment of a pandemic, we have social media. Listen to what they're saying instead of being judgmental all the time, like coming with this kind of judgmental perspective, which sometimes is grounded in generational differences, class differences, you know, within our own communities. But listen, like, I was on Instagram and I follow Quavo, you know, from Migos. And he said, it was YEN, ain't seen these, you know, you ain't seen these, you know, and like, you ain't even seen these. And I was like, oh my God, I just love, I said, it's the language for me. It's the yin for me, you know, and some people you wouldn't get it. And so I sent it to Lamar and I was like, oh my God, I was like, it's the yin for me. And Lamar was like, I don't even know what he said. I don't even know what, and I was like, you don't know. And I'm older, you know, I am 40, you know what I'm saying? I'm in that bracket. And so I was like, it's you ain't, you know what I'm saying? It's you ain't shortened. And so it's not just like, you know, creating space for them to do it, but it creates joy for you too. You know what I'm saying? To be in that space, just it creates joy for you, like, you know. And so I always tell people my perspective. You want to find out what my perspective is or where I'm going to be. I'm going to be with the young people, not because I want to be young, but it's so much joy in that space. You know what I'm saying? With young folks, despite what's happening around us in the world, they're going to create some joy. You know what I'm saying? And I like to have joy too. So I would just say that, you know what I'm saying? Do stuff with Black language. It's beautiful, right? You know what I'm saying? It's our centuries of survival, you know, like do things with it, enjoy it, engage, participate in it, you know, but have those real conversations, you know what I'm saying, with Black young people who will surely experience anti-Black linguistic racism, you know, but the goal is not always that you accommodate that. It's that you push back, you know what I'm saying, against it. And what it looked like if we did have, you know what I'm saying, if we equipped young people with this knowledge from a very young age about what their language is, that we build this strength in our own community and they could speak back to the educators or whoever that's trying to police them, say, let me school you real quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, need that, you know what I'm saying? And so that's how I think about it, the importance of it in community. I really want to do like, you know, like community education, not in that very like, you know, traditional understanding of community education, but I really want to see what this work looks like in spaces where it's not connected to school systems. You know what I'm saying? Where Black children, you know what I'm saying? So that we're hitting it from two ends, that we're trying to think about how to prepare teachers to be in these spaces, but what does it look like if we hit the other end and prepare you know, Black young people, you know, about the brilliance of their language, where they can take that with them into these school spaces and also do the challenging. You know, part of it is that they don't have the language to name their experiences. What would it look like? Say, well, that's actually anti-Black linguistic racism. You know what I'm saying? Or did you know my, how would that shift? So I kind of look at it as like, you know, hitting it from both ends and kind of like, you know, so yeah.
Well, thank you, April. Did you enjoy, Asia? Did you enjoy yourself?
I really did.
I
I
did.
also love. I just kept hearing your Detroit lingo of saying fools. I love Detroit people when they say fool. Like, and they say fool in different contexts. I just love that. What up, fool? I just love it.
I love the regional Black. Sometimes I don't even see it because it's regional too, right? You know what I'm saying? A fool is definitely, I'm always calling somebody a fool. And people get a kick out of it. And I just be like, ain't this what don't y'all call people fools too? But like, you reminded me that, like, you know, this is a kind of a Detroit lingo. I'm always calling somebody a fool. Even my kids are like, why would you call me a fool? And I'm like, you got to get on the bandwagon. It's not meant to be, you know what I'm saying? Like that I'm trying to dog you or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we actually had that conversation in one of my classes, right? Around, like, we were having some conversation around Black language, and I was like, you know, I was just having them throw out different words, and one of the Black girls in my class threw that out, like, what up, fool? And I was like, and we literally sat in class and just dissected it, because I was like, what would y'all have heard? Like, those of you who aren't Detroit, who aren't Black, what would you have heard if you heard young people in the hallway saying, what up, fool? Like, and it
Yeah.
was just so interesting, like how we had to break that down. And I was like, exactly, you know what I mean? So,
And it has
no, this is this.
multiple meanings. That's so beautiful. It has
Mm-hmm.
multiple meanings. It can be something where you are like, you a fool, you a clown, you know. But it's
Right.
also like what you just said, what up, fool, is not. It's not in that. And so like it's also with the N word, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it's so flexible
Yeah.
to understand it. It's multiple. Like it's a way that I might use it and I'm trying to offend you. But you gotta be able to read the entire context to figure out what that is. So
And sometimes it might be something very endearing, because my mother would call us the N word in a minute and be like, not even mad, like,
yeah. My grandma.
like, all right, mom. No, I think this was definitely amazing. I'm happy I got to like talk with you today, April. I've been following your work. I got the book when the book came out. I mean, I just think it's so important. And so, as we're thinking about how important it is for young people, as Tiff said in the beginning of like, this was important for us even at this stage of our lives of being able to affirm what it means to stand in our truths around our Black language. And so I appreciate that and what you're doing for the culture.
Thank you. Oh, the culture. That's what I think.
Because I feel like this episode, I wanted it to be, I feel like this could be in a qualitative research. This is how you do research. Like, this is how you find alignment. And the way you were talking about this, that's why an interview is so good. You got to go buy her book, y'all. And then listen, you gotta really read it from the forward to the end, because it's all good, like I did. And you come and listen to this, because when I think it can provide some direction for scholars. Like I don't fit in. Like I think a lot of us don't fit into the traditional. Those of us who are people are on their journeys, but those of us who are more in alignment with our purpose, our spirit, our wellness, our calling, like all of those things, however you want to define that. But we know who we are. I think a lot of people in the academy struggle because they don't know who they are and they're not confident in who they are. And so I think like what you've shared here is a way of like, we can see the full alignment of what your purpose is, who you are, and being confident in who you are, and the alignment of all of that. And so then I'm okay with saying, this is how I do research. These are communities with which I do it with. And I'm always checking myself to make sure that I'm coming back to that. And so I feel like what you offered us here is so rich in those ways too. But then I also feel like Mama's like, I want my mother to be listening to this, because she used to be correcting me. And then I would see her tell somebody, read them in Black language all up and down. And I saw her do it in church. I saw her do it with the Bible scriptures. I saw her do it with I saw her do it. I saw her in the hair salon talking about how remember when people used to say, oh, you cold. People still say sometimes. We was watching New Jack City. She was like, oh, he cold. The man well, anyway, but they was cold. She was just liking them and they fashion and everything. But then she'll be like, you need to say this. And so I'm like, Mama, Dr. April Baker Bell said I could talk.
Don't you tell Mama to try to whoop me now.
I know that's right.
Look, I seen your mama. You know what I said? I want her with me. You know?
That's another Midwest.
Love my comment. She loved my comment when I was like, oh, well, Tiffany, if this is your mom, we know you're going to be fine all your life. And she loved my comment. Look, we're just going to leave it there. Don't go telling her I said.
Listen.
Of course you did.
I was saying that was so Midwest, the whoop.
Yeah.
I love, listen, when I lived in Chicago, I love when a Black woman would say, who gonna whoop me?
Yeah, who gonna whoop me, boo?
I'm like, you right? They're like, who gonna whoop me?
I love it. I love it. We need an updated Black language dictionary. Dr. G had one, and I'm like, we need one now. Like, I love going to that dictionary because some of the old stuff, but we need an updated dictionary. That's what we need.
Yes, we do. We do. We got to update it. But listen, you ain't going to say that we kept you too long, Dr. April Baker, on the Evolving Education Project, because I want this is the part of our first series, and I want other people to come on. So see how we treated
it was, and no, thank you both for this amazing conversation. And Tiffany, I thank you for connecting me with Asia, because I always, I've seen your videos. I've seen, heard great things, you know what I'm saying, about you. I know you're like some of your students. And so I'm just like, yeah, we need to connect. We're in a pandemic, but I thank you for making this connection among dope Black women scholars, right? You know what I'm saying? That's doing the work for the culture. I think it's so important for us to be in community and conversation. So thanks for allowing this space. And also what this space is going to do for communities and for people, you know what I'm saying? And even archival work that well, when I ain't here no more, you know what I'm saying? That this is something like, as we see the James Baldwin stuff, we see the Toni Morrison folks, our ancestors,
Yeah.
June Jordan, you know what I'm saying? That this is a space, you know what I'm saying? That we are like creating history in real time, you know what I'm saying? And marking things for people and generations to come, you know, to say that this work has been done. So thank you for, thinking of inviting me, but for the podcast and what it's going to continue to do beyond here. So, and you're the right person to do it. So thank you.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
My whole book. You also read the whole book from front to back. I'm happy I made it through the questions. Thank y'all both, because I was like, I looked at them. I saw them when you sent them, and I was like, I'm not even. You know what? I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna freestyle because I'm gonna get a little nervous reading them questions. But you read the book, child. Thank you.
So at least if you get invited on the show to be interviewed,
you better do your homework because she will read the book now.
You will read the book and remember what you said.
Remember.
So if you don't want to say that, if you don't own up to that no more, it's a wrap.
Yes. Yes.
Ain't that like black women to lovingly play you? Well, y'all have a good day. Just remember, they'll edit it out. You can stop. Okay. This is where we stopping at. Yeah. Okay. No, but what I want to tell y'all is y'all could thank you so much. I just appreciate you, both of y'all, so much. I have been talking about this with y'all for a very long time, and it's really happening. And I'm just so thankful for your book, April, because I was like, I am bringing in different people, people of color, different groups. I'm going to focus on different groups. But I said, I got to start with black. I got to start with, I'm a black woman. I might take this segment and put this in the first thing because this is good. I'm a black woman and I got to start with a book that is so blackity, 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 black. And I just felt like, this is because things wasn't working out. And, I was just like, oh my God. And April got me together too. Cause she was like, when I first said, she was like, now, honey, you got to give me more time, baby girl. Like, you got to just but listen, I want to thank you, April, because now I got all of my guests for the next 5 months. Because of you. Okay. Because you told me straight up, you was like, you got to do. I got all of the next, because after I asked April, I was like, okay, I get it. I got to ask people way ahead of time. And I'm good for the next 5 months with all of my authors.
Tiffany. I'm happy because I'm just gonna be honest. This never happened. Just like my life was on fire back in. I'm happy because this is, and I'm closing out. I'm happy that I'm closing out my semester with this. This is one of the last major things that I had to do, and I'm taking, I'm on sabbatical, but I'm taking 6 weeks off, meaning like not responded to anything. So like in October when you sent it, Dominique's schedule shifted from morning to night abruptly. I feel like I was falling apart in October, and I was just like, I just can't even, I want to come and be right too, you know what I'm saying, and show up right in the space. And so, no, thank you for it. Thank you for waiting, because you could have been like, well, I'm about to go on to my next guest. And
no, I ain't. I don't give up. Perseverance. Mama said persevere. I persevere. I said, oh, so what she really said, first of all, I analyzed the email. I was like, what she's really saying is not that she didn't want to do it. She didn't say no. She said, this was a bad time. Let me try another plan.
Because you've been talking about it for a long time. And not only did I want to do it because you're Tiffany, I wanted to do it with Tiffany because like I knew that like how you understand me, there are not many people in academia that knows me, my heart. Tiffany deal with me, I be cussing and stuff like that. And she just like, she know, and she's always there. But like, it's important that I have this conversation with you. And then when I heard Asia was coming on, I'm like, this is going to be really amazing. So it's not just for you. I'm happy to be in conversation with y'all. I'm happy for me,
Yes.
We are so appreciative of this good learning from Dr. April Baker Bell that we received on today. She poured out her heart, intellect, joy. She was real. She was vulnerable. We especially enjoyed the many personal stories she shared with us. Please go out and get her book, Linguistic Justice, Black Language, Literacy, Identity, and Pedagogy. Get it today. Thank you for listening to part 2 of our Talking That Talk, Loving Black Language, Linguistic Justice series. Be sure to tune in for part 3, that is our next episode, where we interview Detroit-based educator and instructional coach, Miss Silver Moore of Classroom Clapback, about her work with teachers and students. Miss Moore is an example of educating Black students in the everyday, in schools and in communities. So if you think anti-racist Black language pedagogy can't be done, Miss Moore will show you how she does it and how she supports other teachers to do it. So check it out. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in, or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.org. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. We hope to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out. EvolvingEducationProject.com